shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I'm your co-host. Today I'm super excited to have my friend Jason Prall from You Optimized Radio as our guest. Jason is a longevity and optimal health practitioner who works remotely with individuals around the world to provide solutions for those struggling with weight loss or suffering from complex health issues that their doctors have been unable to resolve. As a nationally recognized speaker and host of the You Optimized Radio show, he's been able to share his unique and innovative approach with a global audience, which facilitated the transformation of thousands of lives with simple, practical, and powerful solutions to combat chronic health conditions and drastically improve quality of life. Jason's current project is a documentary film series called The Human Longevity Project, which is set to uncover the complex mechanisms of chronic disease and aging and the true nature of longevity in our modern world. Hey, Jason, how are you, man?
Hey, good. Glad to be here. Thanks, Noah.
I love being interviewed for your podcast. I'm honored to return the favor. I'm especially interested in your documentary film series, especially since one of the projects we did a year and a half ago was the Longevity and Anti-Aging Project. So how are you, my world traveler?
I'm doing good. It's always good to chat with like-minded docs, looking at longevity and things from an integrative approach. So always happy to chat.
Yeah. Let's start this off real simple. First question I ask all guests, what's your story, Jason? How did you become the longevity expert that I'm speaking with today? How did you end up where you are? How did you end up coming home from Costa Rica last night on this podcast with me today?
Well, I think it all, like many of us, it starts with our own health, looking at the things that are troubling us as we get older. And my health issues started off pretty young. At the age of 13, I was having joint issues. I had skin problems when in my 20s, developed gluten sensitivity and the skin, the joints, and the food sensitivities really were my big issues that forced me to look at what was going on because, when these things were happening for me, it was, early 2000s. There wasn't a lot of integrative doctors, and if they were out there, you didn't know how to find them because the internet wasn't the internet. So,
right.
It was tough to figure this stuff out. So I kind of had to force myself to figure it out. And over the course of a number of years and slowly making headway into understanding, physiology and really what's happening, I kind of started to get a hang of this stuff and, hung out with a bunch of smart people like yourself, integrative functional doctors, and just started to use kind of an understanding of how the body works and an understanding of how to think about disease and think about health to kind of practice in an integrative functional model. But kind of as I went through that, what I thought, there are a lot of great doctors out there, and some of them yet still aren't focusing on health, right? Which is why you and I have such great conversations because you focus on health, but yet there's still a lot of doctors out there that are only focusing on disease. And whether you're focusing on disease from a functional or integrative standpoint or holistic or naturopathic standpoint, you're still missing a key point when you're not thinking about the health aspect of things, right? There's tribes and societies around the world that essentially their medicine men basically get replaced or let go if there's a lot of disease or sickness in the group, in the society, right? So they basically have an understanding that if the tribe or the society is healthy, then the medicine man is doing his job. And so, I think that's kind of what prompted me to go from the sort of functional medicine integrative standpoint, only focusing on disease, to then, the health side of things and looking at longevity because, there's a difference between not being sick and truly being healthy. Right. So that's really what I wanted to focus on was kind of optimal health and not just the absence of disease, but really the presence of vitality and wellness in somebody. So that's kind of where I made my shift. And, I still do a lot of the integrative medicine type of things, but I really have just decided to focus on looking at really, really healthy populations around the world and trying to understand what makes them healthy, not just simply, the absence of disease in those populations.
Right. Well, when we're looking at you, how did you make that transformation using yourself as the model? Because like you said, you had chronic knee problems, skin issues, gluten sensitivity. Obviously, a lot of connections there. How did you
Yeah.
use you as the model? How did that come about?
Well, I think it came down to me looking at my lifestyle, and I said, okay, instead of trying to figure out the disease mechanisms and try to interject there, it was really just a philosophy of, kind of just coming to an understanding and a realization that health is innate. It's built in. This is something we are sort of designed to be, is healthy. And so, when I started looking at my own lifestyle practices, I realized how many things were basically they were blocking my health. So, I started looking at circadian rhythm function and how to optimize mitochondrial function and remove a lot of these blocking factors that were preventing me from moving forward, because it wasn't that I couldn't figure out the disease mechanisms. It was, okay, how do I deliver health in the most fundamental way? So, I basically just got stuck until I started incorporating sort of health practices as opposed to simply disease mitigation and that kind of thing. So, really something like sleep, right? Sleep is not something that you use to combat disease. Sleep and proper sleep and good sleep, and I don't just mean 7 hours, but I mean really going through the stages of sleep so that you're repairing, that's a health practice, right? So
Right.
it was those type of things where I was looking at, okay, if I really want to get healthy, like I have to focus on sleep and I've got to understand it and get good at it. And so what does that take? That's not a disease solution. That's a health solution. So it was just kind of a something clicked at some point, and I can't even say when that was, but that's when it all kind of switched for me, and that took my own health to the next level, and I was able to start taking other people's health to the next level as well.
Yeah, you're speaking, my original health language, which is Chiropractic 101, is, remove the subluxation and remove the misalignment and allow the
Right.
body to function and heal like it was designed to, just like you said. Now, there's obviously a ton of barriers, whether it's nutritional, poor sleeping, subluxation, or misalignment, but it all comes down to the same fundamental practice of setting up the body for its optimal ability to heal its own self, right?
Right. Right. And that's just it. Like, it has instructions, right? So we don't need to rewrite the instruction booklet. We just need to let it do it. The way I kind of look at the body almost is I sort of intentionally simplify it, and kind of look at the body as a black box and say, okay, well, I don't need to go interject biochemical necessarily. I just have to figure out how to let it do what it does. And don't worry about all the complex mechanisms going on to some degree. You can get in there and do some things, and that's great, but you have to get rid of the things that are blocking. Then if you need to go to the next step and get all doctory on the body, if you're trying to dig into the internal workings of the body and you haven't optimized your surroundings and your environment and your thinking and your emotions and your relationships and all that stuff, then what are we talking about? Because you can run functional tests, you can run the best tests in the world, and if you have really screwed up relationships or you have poor sleep or your circadian rhythm is messed up, good luck. You're going to see all kinds of stuff come back on those labs, and to try to interject at that point without fixing the other stuff, you're just going to chase your tail.
Now, here's just a blanket question that we talked about prior is, what is the biggest contributors to autoimmunity and food sensitivities, even in your case, that's totally being missed by the integrative medicine scene?
Yeah, I think, and this was something that I struggled with forever, right? I got better with a lot of my health. The last thing for me was gluten sensitivity. And when I looked at that, and I had this gluten sensitivity that I didn't have before. I didn't have it in my teens. I didn't have it at any point. And then all of a sudden, at some point in my 20s, it was noticeable. And I made huge strides to resolve a lot of my other health issues, but I still had this gluten sensitivity. And what that told me was that I'm missing something, that there's something about my immune system that is still going haywire, that is still not corrected. What is it, and what's causing the problem? Because I'd fixed my environment. At least in large part. And what I ended up figuring out for myself was that it was these sort of hidden stealth infections, things like viruses, bacteria. We look at Lyme disease, and that's great, but Lyme disease that's Borrelia. That's one species of bacteria. We have Bartonella, we've got Babesia, we've got Rickettsia and Ehrlichia, and all kinds of stuff going on. And then you have the viruses, right? I mean, so many viruses that cause problems and so many versions of viruses. And the problem that I see with, and it's not the fault of any functional medicine or integrative medicine or any doctors, because the thinking I think is there. The problem is we don't have technology to be able to find this stuff very well. And we can't find viruses that are in the brain or the cerebrospinal fluid and the nervous system tucked away in various organs, these type of things. So the technology is not very good. We're not there yet. And so how do you find something without the technology? But at the same time, how do you treat something that you can't find? So I think, and this is coming from a science-based guy. I was an engineer. I've been embedded in science, but unfortunately I had to at some point come to face the facts that there was really no way I was going to get to this level of sort of detection with traditional methods. So I kind of had to open myself up to energy testing, right? You might call it muscle testing or applied, but this type of thing. And so once I let down, I said, okay, let's try this. Did some energy testing and found a handful of infections that range from Borrelia, Bartonella, Giardia, HTLV, all kinds of stuff going on underneath a lot of this, inflammation that was always there. But once I was able to clear those, and when I say clear those, what I mean is that my immune system, I upregulated my immune system, and I sort of dampened the progression of these infections to the point where my immune system could regain control. And when we talk about things like Epstein-Barr and some of these things, you don't necessarily get rid of them fully, completely, right? You're always going to have some of that in you, and that's okay. It's just in my view, it's can your immune system regulate it properly, and is your immune system functioning properly? So, for my own health, and I'm speaking from my own experience, when I got really able to regain control of that stuff, my gluten sensitivity went away. And the thing about my gluten sensitivity was I did all the tests, right? I did the proper function, did the gene sensitivity testing for it, and I had 2 genes. So everything was there for me to quote unquote be gluten sensitive. And yet I wasn't gluten sensitive in the early part of my teens and in early part of my 20s. Then all of a sudden I was for about 5 to 10 years. And then I'm not anymore. I can fully eat bread with no problem. So that was a real big eye opener for me. It was when that change happened, when I got rid of the infections, my immune system regained control, my gut was able to heal, and the food sensitivity stuff kind of just fell away. So that's what I think is being missed right now. And I don't think it's anybody's fault except for the fact that we just can't test for it in the traditional ways. So it's kind of hard for us to talk about. And even something like this, when I mentioned energy testing, it's kind of leaving me open a little bit, right? Because, energy testing, applied kinesiology, muscle testing isn't truly accepted in our world fully yet. And I think, like anything else, it's a practice, and it's probably subject to a lot of error and, some sort of misunderstanding. So anyway, that's what I think is being missed. That comes from my own experience. I've worked with dozens of people on this stuff, and food sensitivities and autoimmune conditions, they go away. And I don't mean, they go away if you avoid gluten and dairy and corn and soy and all these things. No, they fully go away, and you're able to eat those foods again, if you so choose, so.
And that's fully a function of a properly functioning immune system.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is I think part of the misconception about autoimmunity is that the immune system is attacking the body. And I mean, you might be able to sort of say that when you logically step back for a second and say, okay, I think the immune system to attack the body. I mean, that kind of implies that the immune system, is kind of stupid and it's, causing harm to itself. In my opinion, if that were the case, our species wouldn't have made it very far. We would have died out long ago. So I come from from the mindset that our body is essentially perfectly designed, whether you want to say through evolution or nature or God or universe or however you want to classify that. It doesn't really matter to me, but that's my fundamental core belief, and that if we start from there, then the body is going to always try to balance itself. It doesn't seem logical that it's going to attack itself. So I think that the immune system can get out of whack. It can get hypersensitive, and it can, especially if you have infections, really be in sort of attack mode. But it's not attacking the body, in my opinion. It's trying to take care of the infections. And you can see this a lot with a thyroid, right? Why do we get nodules? Well, it's because it's trying to encase the infection, usually Epstein-Barr. And if you can clear the Epstein-Barr, Hashimoto's goes away. We kind of forget that Hashimoto, it's called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? So what does that mean? That just means it's some guy's name and the thyroid is inflamed, right? So we throw these complex names at it, and yet it really doesn't say anything. So I started off with the opinion that the autoimmune thing was the body attacking itself due to, cross-reactive proteins and these type of things. I've since changed my stance on that with this sort of unveiling of these potential infections. I mean, if we think about viruses and bacteria, they've been a part of evolutionary biology from the get-go. This is how, through horizontal gene transfer, it's partially the reason that we have so many species on this planet. Viruses and bacteria and molds and fungi and parasites are the reason that old people get sick more often and young people get sick more often, because the immune system's not strong enough. It's not as strong as the sort of the middle-aged group. So I think it's a delicate balance of the immune system protecting you and the viruses and the bacteria and the environment. And that would be a really smart design by life to be able to balance itself. And I think what's happened is that we've lost control of our immune systems through poor birthing practices, through a lack of breastfeeding, through poor emotional states and family situations, through toxins in the environment, right? I mean, the average baby's born with 280 to 320 chemicals in the umbilical cord, right? I mean, this is horrific what we're doing. So of course our immune system's going to be weak. So we don't have a defense anymore.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me in a variety of reasons. One, I spend a lot of time outdoors, and I just got bit by my first tick and had to have my wife remove it from me. And she had a tug of war with this little tiny bug.
Oh my God.
So I'm on a bunch of antimicrobials prophylactically just to make sure that little guy didn't transfer anything over far beyond Lyme disease. And secondly, like you mentioned, it's just this thing we've created in our society now, this incredible matrix of ill health where it's not just an infection. It's like it's poor sleep. Right. It's like glyphosate, and it's all these things, and it's so hard to pinpoint. It's so hard to nail down, and it's got to come back down to what you're an expert in, and then that's creating the healthy person and traditional practices. So let's go there. Where you've been working on this documentary series, the Human Longevity Project. You're interviewing these people in these different blue zones. You just got back from Costa Rica. Now, what are some? It's not finished yet, but what are some of the insights you're starting to learn from these people that have lived long, healthy lives, that live in areas where people are healthy, that live to 80, 90, 100, that have strong social groups around them? What are you putting together now? What can we expect in the future with this project?
Well, and you hit it on the head in a lot of ways. And first, let me say this, that I've said it before, and I think it's very important to understand that we can't learn anything about health by studying disease. Right? That's like trying to understand light by studying the darkness. You can't do it. So we have to look at healthy people if we want to understand the potential for health. And so, although I'm not going in there and doing physiological studies, we can do epidemiological stuff, right? We can ask questions and just get a sense of things. And I mean, oh my gosh, it's fascinating when you talk to these people. Since we just talked about infections, I'll start off on this. A lot of people in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and even some of the younger kids in the 30s, they actually said that they get dengue fever quite a bit. And, you know, if somebody got dengue fever here in the States, you know, be off to the hospital and, you know, get some sort of antibiotic or you know, vaccine or something, right? They treat it with modern medical approaches.
Right.
And what they used to do down there is very simple. They would use herbs and plants to resolve that issue. And really wasn't that tough for them. I think they would take papaya leaves, I believe, and make a tea out of that to clear the dengue fever. They used something called wani lama, which is an amazing sort of medicinal tea that they make, and that gets rid of dengue. So it also lowers and combats sort of high cholesterol. So it works in a number of ways, but this is something that they used to figure this stuff out, to get rid of the stuff. And one of the 30-year-olds I was talking to, he got dengue, and he said he felt awful, and he was going to go to the hospital to get it taken care of. And his mom kind of looked at him and was talking to him and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Don't go to the hospital. They're going to give you things that make you weaker." And she gave him the papaya leaves and the tea that they make, and he said he was better in 3 days. So, you know, we kind of have this fear about these things. These people figured it out, you know, over generations, and the knowledge was passed down. One of the things, though, that, you know, I think will be probably very apparent in many of these sort of longevity zones around the world as we release this docuseries, is that while they are still very healthy in these places, they may not be longevity zones for much longer. They are adopting Western ways. They have tourism coming. So a lot of the people that I interviewed that were in their 70s and 80s and 90s down there, they were recalling times that were much different. I mean, in a lot of these village areas, they didn't get electricity until 30 years ago. So, I mean, think about that. They don't have lights. They don't have washers and dryers. They're literally working in the fields with, with their bare hands with very basic equipment. They're outside all the time, right? They have good social groups. One of the ladies was telling me that the women would stay home and take care of the household and usually the small farm stuff and raise the kids and all these things, do a lot of the chores around the house. And she said that one of her favorite things she used to do, this was probably 40 years ago or 50 years ago, was after the men would come back from working in the fields and doing all their stuff outside essentially, that they would pick all the ticks and the bugs off of them, kind of like monkeys do. She's right. Like, that was one of our favorite things. We would take care of the men as they would come home, and they looked forward to that, and we looked forward to it. And so, totally fascinating that that's the way they used to live. And, it's starting to change. And the younger generations are losing some of that knowledge that the older generations had. So it's, Western medicine's kind of coming in there, and the medical systems are kind of coming in there. It's not nearly as bad as we have here in terms of drugs and, this sort of rush to, give treatment. But the times are changing down there. And, you could sense that it's not going to be like that for much longer in a lot of these areas, and that there are practices that allow them to live these long, healthy lives, are going to be sort of relegated to these small little villages around the coast. So, it was fascinating. Part of it was very much expected. Some of the things I heard, some of it wasn't. Some of it was pretty remarkable. I'll give you another example that was pretty cool to hear. I asked one of the old ladies about birthing practices. I said, how long did you, when you were younger, how long did women breastfeed? And she said, well, it depends. Anywhere from a year to up to 6 years. If they, and I said, 6 years. Why so long? And she said, well, that was the method of birth control. If you didn't want to get pregnant, you kept breastfeeding.
Right. And
I was like, wow, that's a fascinating thing. So they're like, that's kind of a double whammy, right? Not only is the kid getting really healthy sustenance from the mother for many, many years, and they probably incorporated other foods, of course, but not only is that happening, but instead of taking birth control pills like we do here in the West, which you and I both know destroy gut bacteria and cause all kinds of hormonal problems.
Right.
Instead, they're staying in a natural state. So, pretty fascinating to hear that stuff. And, I can't imagine a woman here in the West would be not only able to do that, but would want to do that, to be, nursing for 6 years, as a method of trying to keep from getting pregnant. So, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of fascinating information. And I think it's going to shed light on how you remain healthy. And not all of them were as weird as that, But I will say that the point of this docuseries is to show the things that create health and longevity, but also with the understanding that we can't live like the people in Costa Rica on the Nicoya Peninsula. We can't live like Okinawans, right? If you're living in Chicago, good luck living like an Okinawan. It's just not going to happen. So we have to take the information that we can glean from those areas and now have a modern application for it, right? And so a good example of that would be, okay, how do we combat these artificial lights at night? Well, we wear the orange glasses, right? We wear the blue blockers, and we download things on our computer so that they're not as bright, right? So those are kind of small steps that can, with the understanding of, circadian rhythm and in the natural world, you don't see bright blue, green, white lights at night. So that's the point. The point is to not simply say, okay, they eat mostly a vegetarian diet and they de-stress and they have good social groups and blah, blah, blah. The point is to say, okay, it's a lot of these other things too, and how can we apply that to our situation here in the West? And what things do we have here in the West that are causing problems that you don't see in these other places?
It's taking ancient wisdom and applying modern technology and biohacks to it to create. Right. Now, absolutely. Now you spent some time in Loma Linda, California, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a fascinating place.
Why is that considered a longevity or a blue zone? What are they doing different? Is that the religious group there?
Yeah, the Seventh-day Adventists. Yes,
that's right. Yeah. So they're primarily vegetarian. They are vegetarian, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Well, and so one of the experts that we interviewed, Arista Vojdani, who I'm sure you're familiar with, right? He's a immunologist, does a lot of research. He's a professor at Loma Linda. He actually does some teaching out there. So, actually interviewed him to basically get a better understanding of immune system function. And, I asked him about Loma Linda as well. And one of the things that struck me that he said was that there was obvious when we went out there was, I'm just going to say it, it's kind of a dump. It's kind of full. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's next to San Bernardino. It's polluted. You drive in and you see a McDonald's and you're like, this is the place. This is far from a paradise. It's kind of this dumpy little town. Right. But what's fascinating, and it's very toxic actually. It's one of the most toxic places in California. Well, I'd say one of the most. It's very toxic because it's inland and they just don't have great systems there. They definitely don't have good waters and any of that stuff. So you have to ask yourself, okay, if they're facing kind of an uphill battle, they must be doing some other things right. And, a couple of things that we noticed were, yes, primarily they have a vegetarian diet. Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there that love to talk about food and debate food and what's the right way to eat. One of the things I can say about a veg diet, especially when we're talking about a lot of research that looks at protein, specific amino acids that kind of shut down the longevity part. So when you're looking at longevity, there's kind of this seesaw battle. One is on one side of the equation, you have sort of the having babies, right, and being in this progestation state, right, and there's kind of this growth baby having state, and then once that shuts off, then you have kind of this longevity situation. So they're actually kind of on opposite ends of the seesaw. So there's fascinating research that looks at that, and that looks at, okay, what is it that kind of flips that switch? And a couple of things are certain amino acids. So, don't eat as much animal protein, particularly. You're losing some of those amino acids, which actually can give you this longevity. And of course, there's lots of other beneficial things about plants. They feed the gut microbiome, sort of the energy aspect of them from the mitochondria standpoint. They're very easy to digest. There's a lot of great things. So that's not to say I fully support and endorse a vegetarian diet, but I will say for longevity purposes, it can be very useful, especially in your later years as you kind of flip into this longevity aspect of life, as opposed opposed to, having babies. So, there's that. But they also have a strong faith. And having a strong faith in whatever religion or spiritual practice you have is important because it gives you a sense of purpose, gratitude for something other than yourself. It can join people together, right? So it strengthens communities. And that's one thing you see there. When you go to Loma Linda, as dumpy of a place as it may seem from the outside, once you kind of get in the mix, man, you've got hospitals and the whole university is dedicated to health, basically, and dentists and all the chiropractors, all these things in the community. It's a small community, but man, they are so focused on health that it's pretty fascinating. And so it's a community focus on health. It's a community driven place. And not only that, the Seventh-day Adventist sort of practice does involve a lot of good things when it comes to health. Taking time off, relaxing, getting outside, eating organic, vegetarian type of stuff. So, there's a lot of things that go on in there, but it's definitely, I would say, the odd man out, if you will, from the rest of the places we look at, because it just doesn't seem to fit. It's kind of the only one that's not an island or a peninsula. The other ones being Sardinia over in Italy and Icaria in Greece, and then you have Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and then you have Okinawa, which is an island in Japan. So, and there's a couple other ones around the world. So I wouldn't say those are the only ones, but those are the ones that have been identified kind of in the research and by National Geographic in the 90s. And so we're just kind of using that as a template to look at what's really happening there. So when you look at Loma Linda, it just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, and you're going, what the heck is going on there?
Yeah,
so it's cool.
Just I guess to just finish tying up the protein idea, I guess you're talking more about the MTOR pathway and then maybe some protein sparing kind of diets for longevity, I would imagine, in more of a modern day application, right?
Yeah. And a couple of the papers that I sort of thinking about, they do identify the mTOR pathway and actually some other things too that they weren't really sure what was happening. But if I remember right, it was, I can't remember what the amino acid actually off the top of my head. But they identified a specific amino acid. It was very fascinating to look at that, at least in that particular research. But absolutely, I think, the mTOR pathways is definitely one that, we can look at, particularly with longevity and growth and these type of things.
You mentioned it several times with the social networks. And when I read and was interested in the blue zones, I think they particularly targeted Okinawa as having like a strong social group. I forget the terminology they used, but you're seeing that more now in our world, where a friend of mine, James Maskell, talks about sociogenomics and how important that is, even in the social aspect within the functional medicine realm. And then in Rob Wolf's new book, Wired to Eat, he's talking about the social aspect. So I mean, it's in the forefront. Social connection is becoming more and more prevalent in the forefront, in front of people's minds, and that's a forefront in all of these blue zones. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I would say thank God it's becoming to the forefront, because we've become so disconnected. It's kind of crazy, right? I mean, I don't know how to put it any other way, but we are connected through technology, but we are not really that connected anymore through real world experiences. And so you're starting to see a comeback in that, I think, and it's really good to see. And now the research and the health world is now looking at that and understanding it. The guys out of UCLA, Dr. Cole in particular, they're looking at, in the stress lab, they're looking at a lot of this stuff, social genomics. And we actually interviewed James Maskell for our docuseries, and he shed some some light on some very good things. And it's very surprising things that, there's research out there that is looking at fascinating things, like people getting fired, and when one person gets fired versus the group getting fired, and the dynamic that causes. It's crazy. And I think it's probably more important than we currently recognize, and it's really coming to the forefront, like you mentioned. But I think it probably has a long way to go, and on some level, it shouldn't surprise us, right? I mean, we are social creatures at our very nature, and so when you don't have that, it stands to reason that there's a lot of things physiologically that will go haywire, that will basically keep us in this chronic stress mode, that will activate sort of our stress response and our autonomic nervous system and shift it over to the sympathetic side, and, keep us in this fight or flight thing of, I don't belong. And so that's going to have a huge impact on things, and it's, yeah, you're right. It's in every blue zone, and we still have yet to go to a couple of them. But from my research on the outside, I can tell you that's been looked at, and so when we go there, it'll be interesting to see it. And that's the whole point of us going to these areas, is to look at them and show the lifestyles, show how these people interact, show what they're doing. Because it's important to see that it's not that longevity and health in our later years doesn't come from a fantastic medical system and health care for everybody, and it's not even just food, which I think a lot of people were still in this mindset that if I just eat healthy and I move, then I'll live a long, healthy life, and that's just not the case. So those are two very important things, but our goal with this project is to show all the things that really matter. And I can tell you that childhood traumas and social connections are two massive components to health and longevity. And if you look, I think everybody has a story or knows somebody with a story of, yeah, my grandfather used to drink whiskey every day and smoke cigarettes till he was 95. Right? We have all heard somebody with that story, or we know somebody that was like that. Right? So how can we look at that? He used to eat bacon and eggs all the time, or he ate this every day. You hear those stories all the time, and it's always the weirdest food, or smoking or drinking or something to that effect. And so we can't look at these things in isolation. If that person has, had a really good birthing experience, a really strong family connection, really good social connections throughout their life, they were outside all the time, they got good sleep, all those type of things, their physical structure was in good shape, they didn't, beat themselves up. Hey, maybe your body can overcome, constant stress of drinking or smoking or eating a crappy diet. So there's a lot we have to look at, and it's not that hard. It may sound overwhelming. It's pretty darn simple. You just have to see it for what it is and start to incorporate it.
Yeah, we could just start with sleeping, right? And this is my downfall. Yeah. You can just start with sleeping and conquer sleeping in all its glory, and that could solve 90% of your problems.
Right.
Or create 90% of your problems.
Right. Well, think about it. What's the one time we actually recover? It's during sleep. We basically, our bodies are in sort of catabolic destruction mode during the day. That's sort of the nature of the day. And, despite the fact that you're eating, that's sort of irrelevant. The place at which you recover, where your cells turn over, where, all the recycling, cell suicide, that primarily happens at night. All the autophagy, the mitophagy, all this stuff really happens. I think we're still in the dark ages when it comes to even understanding sleep. Who knows? There's a lot of, ancient cultures that I think probably have a way better understanding than we do. So, there's still a long way to go, I think, in fully understanding what sleep is doing, but clearly it is the mechanism by which we extend our lives. Right. And the easiest example I'll give, look at an insomniac and look at somebody who cannot literally sleep. It ain't good. They go downhill very quickly. So there's a reason that your body shuts down and it's to recharge those batteries. So, I totally agree with you. I'm a huge proponent of if you want to focus on one thing, focus on sleep. Forget everything else. If you need to focus on one thing, just dial that in and get good at that. And if you're not sleeping, and you're not focusing on sleeping, then you're really doing yourself a disservice.
I totally agree. After interviewing Dr. Kirk Parsley and Dr. Michael Bruce and James Swanwick, I agree with you 100%.
Right?
Start with sleep first. Absolutely. With 100%.
And I know I remember you had blue blockers on. I think the last.
Listen, I have them on right. I got them on right now. I have
exactly.
I have 3 different companies of blue blockers. I test them all out. I look at the different stylish ones. There's the True Dark Day Walkers. I got them all. I've been practicing, trying them, figuring them out, using them, and it's made a big difference. My kids have multiple pairs, so it's a big deal for sure.
Well, and you kind of highlight the point that I like to make. on some level, we kind of have to get dorky with this stuff, right? Like you can't be the cool guy anymore and focus on this stuff because our modern world is so screwed up. So have some fun with it, go get those weird glasses and something new comes out, play with it, see what works for you, just let go of all the nonsense and, fill your house with candles, light a fire again for crying out loud, get the orange bulbs and the red bulbs and just play around with that stuff and just kind of let go. So I love the fact that you do that. That's awesome.
Yep. I hear you. Now, you mentioned something and it probably got glossed over, but I wanted to touch upon it. You mentioned childhood traumas, and the way we got introduced was through Nikki Gratrix, and her work just freaking blows my mind. With all our emotional work she does and all the statistics and everything. Now, is there a correlation in these blues? Are you seeing anything with how these societies deal with traumas? Is it a social thing? Are you seeing any connections? What are you making on that front and childhood traumas in these areas?
I mean, there's a lot less of it, I can tell you that. Partially because they have a stronger social connection and a stronger family connection. Okay. And the family is important. The elder, the 94-year-old grandma isn't pushed to the side in a nursing home. She is the head of the household, and so there's respect for the older generations. There's a tight family connection. Part of most of these blue zones, they have this same mentality of chill the heck out, I mean, in Costa Rica, they say pura vida, right? And just live a pure life, just relax. And they even say it just as a hello and a goodbye, right? When you say goodbye to somebody, they say pura vida. So it's this constant reminder of just relax. It's all good, So their stress levels are so much lower, and while their lives may seem harder, I think one of the fascinating things I remember talking to one of the gals about was, we had to work for our food every day. Some of the fruits were growing on trees. We can go pick it easy. We had to farm. We had to basically our day was working so that we could live. But she also said, but that was easy because we knew what we do every day. There was no stress. It was just work. So we had work, but we had no stress because we knew exactly what we needed to do every single day. And I thought that was fascinating, right? I mean, think about us. We are constantly stressed, right? Oh my God, what's the boss going to think? Oh my gosh, I have all these employees I got to take care of. I got a million emails I got to answer. So our days are changing, even though they may seem rather, boring or dull or repetitive. We're constantly stressed out with all these things. When you're working with the land and you're working with, more natural environment, there's just the stress isn't there. So overall, they have much lower stress. The childhood traumas are not nearly as significant. The birthing is better. So, when a child has a umbilical cord wrapped around its neck and it comes into this world in a stressed out mode, that child's wired for stress. And it's usually going to take some undoing to sort of, undo that stuff. So everything that they do facilitates less trauma. And that, I think, just translates to a healthier human, because you're not in this sympathetic nervous system state. You're not in this, this overdrive, this stress, this HPA axis, overdrive. And, going back to infections even, there's viruses that take advantage of somebody that's in a stressed out state. When cortisol rises, adrenaline rises, that's when they will move around the body. And they might migrate to another part of the body. So the viruses and the bacteria are sensing this in us. So if you've got an infection and you're constantly stressed, well, now you're gonna speed the progression of that viral sort of pathogenesis. So it all ties together. And Nikki, and we interviewed her for our docuseries as well. She's amazing with stats. She'll throw them at you all day long, and they're unbelievable. I mean, it's like the more childhood traumas that we get, and it applies to adulthood trauma as well, but the more trauma we carry, the more we see, poor health practices, in terms of smoking and drinking and drug abuse and all these things. But we also see, even without that stuff, we see just poor health, more likelihood of a heart attack, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, et cetera. You name a disease, it doesn't matter, cancer. More likelihood of cancer if somebody has childhood traumas than somebody that doesn't or has fewer childhood traumas. That's fascinating, despite whether they do from a lifestyle perspective. So some of it is lifestyle driven, but some of it is physiologically driven that is not lifestyle at all. So it's a huge one. It's a major, major thing. And it comes down to how we bring children into this world. How, are we doing C-sections? Are we, adoptions and abortions or failed abortions or what have you? Are these things happening at a higher rate? And if so, what's that doing to the kids? And how is that going to affect their health in their later years? And so it's not easy to understand this stuff, but the studies, as sort of broad maybe as they are just beyond telling. You have to be a fool to deny the relationship between childhood trauma and disease later on in life.
Yeah. Who while we start winding this down, who are some of the few other people that you interviewed just to spark our audience interest in this project a little bit more?
Yeah, we've got some pretty great people and a diverse group. We've got experts like Karan Krishnan, Arista Vojdani, Michael Bruce, who you mentioned earlier, on sleep. We've got Sachin Patel that's involved, Nikki Gratrix, and then we've got other people that maybe aren't, well, they're still experts, but they're not maybe at the sort of clinical research side of things. Guys like J.P. Sears, right? You may know him from.
No, that's great.
Right? So, and he not only is he a funny guy, but his whole thing is he uses humor for health purposes, right? He's lightening the whole stage around health, right? He mocks these things that we all kind of take so seriously. So it's brilliant. And, we talk about that, and a lot of other things. I mean, he's a smart dude, knows a ton about emotional stuff. We've got Ben Greenfield from sort of the fitness and physiological side of things, and the nutrition side of things. So, I mean, those are just some. We've got a number of people. I think we're going to be interviewing Bruce Lipton here soon. His biology of belief is fascinating stuff. Amazing researcher.
Seminal book, one of the most important books written in the last 50 years by far.
Right? I totally agree. And when I saw that stuff, I'm like, holy crap, this changes everything, So I've long wanted to interview him, and so I think that's going to happen here soon. And then other guys that may not seem like they fit, but they're going to provide amazing information. Preston Smiles, he does a lot of these sort of talking poetry videos that you see on YouTube and Facebook. The guy's all about love. And his work about connection and bringing people together and sharing the love and supporting each other and compassion, that's huge for health. So, we're kind of hitting it all. The meditation crowd, the spiritual crowd, the fitness crowd, the sleep crowd, the paleo crowd, the CrossFit crowd. I mean, it's literally the entire spectrum of people. Because all those things play a role in longevity, how are the childbirthing and how important that is. I mean, we touch on vaccines and that kind of thing, and that's a touchy subject these days, and there's a lot of debate about what's good, what's bad, and how we should approach that. All I can say is from the people that we talk to, they didn't give vaccinations back in the day, and so I'm not going to say vaccinations are good or bad. I will say that they didn't need them. So whether or not we need them today is maybe a different question that needs to be talked about. But in those places, 50, 60, even 30 and 40 years ago, they weren't giving vaccinations to children. So, what's interesting about that comment is that we have to start to think about this, that maybe we don't need them as much as we think we do, and hopefully we can change the conversation about that a little bit instead of having this very emotionally driven, they cause autism. No, they don't. They are responsible for curing, eradicating these infectious diseases. That's kind of the conversation right now. Well, can we just step back a little bit and say, maybe we don't need them as much as we think we do, because here's some examples of populations that live a very long, healthy life that they didn't give them. So, that kind of thing. We just want to look at and see what was done. And we want to take the on-the-ground real-world experience and also interview, experts here in the modern world and see what they say. And does it correlate? And so far, we've found some fascinating correlations. They're saying kind of the same things. Risto Vostani said, I asked them, and usually I know what these people are going to say. I've researched and I've listened to them enough that I kind of know their opinions. I said, hey, what do you think about, this idea that, getting these sicknesses, maybe as children and as adults, is a good thing for the immune system? And he said, absolutely. We need to be getting sick. That's like weight training for your immune system. You get stronger. And I was glad that he said that, because that was kind of my opinion, and I was hoping he would sort of back me up, and he did. He's fully on board with the fact that getting sick is not a bad thing. It's not fun, but your immune system gets training. It's like a software download for your immune system. And the more practice it gets, the more it understands, more it knows how to write that software, write that program, then, hey, you're going to be in better shape as you go.
Well, this is a topic for another day, but that we're trading infectious diseases with autoimmune diseases because our nervous system is not getting that education it needs anymore. I mean, we all know it. It's obvious.
Totally agree with you. I couldn't agree more. And it is. That's a big topic in and of itself, but it's important to at least understand that,
Yep. All right. So I'm super excited for this. I can't wait to help promote this project. When do you see it likely coming out?
Yeah, I think we'll be wrapping up the production and the final pieces of this thing probably in October or so, maybe November. And so, with all the pieces that we've got to put together for it, to get ready to kind of let it out there, probably in January of next year. And it'll be, free on the internet, to watch. So, we're going to give people access to this thing, and we want people to see what health looks like and see what the health practices are. We don't want to show you what disease is and say, you got to come to me for the solution. We want to show you the solution because it's yours. You have it. There's nothing preventing you from getting it. You just have to figure out what is causing the diseases and how to apply these health practices.
Now, final thing, Jason, how can our audience in the meantime get in touch with you, your work, your podcast, the whole thing?
Yeah, they can check out my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and all that stuff. It's You Optimized Radio. I've been slacking on it lately with all my travel, but I have been interviewing some of those experts, and I'm going to be releasing some of that stuff here soon. You can email me if they have any specific questions. I'm always open to email, so you can shoot me an email at jason@jasonprall.com. And they can check out my website, jasonprall.com. I've got a couple articles there and just some things kind of talking about what I do. But yeah, we hope to get a public website out here soon for this project, because we really just want to get people involved and give them the solutions that they're looking for, so that they can combine a lot. Because this is what you do. I know you do this as a chiropractor. You teaching people the lifestyle stuff while you work on them from a physical standpoint, nutritional standpoint, because that's your specialty. But in order to have that stick, they got to do all the lifestyle stuff. And so this is what we're trying to do, is help get that conversation started, so that, good doctors, good integrative physicians, chiropractors, acupuncturists can do their work and have it stick better, because without the lifestyle stuff, they have to keep coming back, right? You can't fix them if they don't help you with that stuff. So
right.
That's what we're trying to do.
Great. Well, thanks again, Jason. I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation. You're just always a fascinating person to talk to, and now that I have a better idea what this project is, I'm really excited for it. So thank you again.
Well, thanks for giving me the platform to talk about it, and I am sure I'll be seeing you very soon.
Absolutely. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoya, your co-host, and you are listening to the Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please share this with your friends and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. Leaving a review and rating on iTunes help us move up the chart. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome.